All right, Parshas Vayigash, whatever introduction it needs. It got yesterday from Rabbi Kutov, the Parsha of Yehuda. What? Parsha of Yehuda approaching Yosef. Finally, it's very easy for us to look at this with our own eyes. Everything is in the context of Chazal. Everything is in the context of the level they were on. So everything we're saying here is that disclaimer that this is all through they were Gedolei Olam. These are the biggest people in the world, and it's very hard to understand. But basically, Yehuda had decided that it was time to step up. It was time to finally confront Yosef, even according to some parts in Rashi, maybe even in a threatening undertone. And he goes through the entire parsha, beginning to end, what happened from when they first started communicating with Yosef till things broke down very quickly, back and forth with Binyamin. Now they're here again, things broke down again, and he's finally speaking up and saying, sort of like what's going on here, and we mean business. So a lot of Torah on this. I want to just start off with a story. A couple years ago, more than a couple years ago, in Cleveland Heights, they decided to put, the four-way stops they have at every intersection, or everything that might even look like an intersection, or sometimes even just a driveway, but there's lots of four-way stops, right? So it's a safety thing, because what happens is you stop, and then you assume that once you've stopped, you have the next right of way, and you'll go. Like the other car will stop for you. And it's a really good safety thing, because as soon as you leave Cleveland Heights to, let's say, planet Earth, you're anywhere else, and then you stop, and then you assume you're right of way, and you forgot that it's not a four-way stop everywhere else, and the other guy just...
You have to be a driver. You have to look.
Yeah. So this happened a couple years ago. I was at my parents' house, and my family and I were going on vacation. The minivan, we were leaving my parents to go out to Pennsylvania. We were leaving the house, and we were going down the block, and it took us a while to finally get in the car. We had a whole store with a refrigerator, which we don't have time for, but it's a really interesting story. Remind me to tell you the story about the refrigerator. Demo mode. Fascinating story. So we finally get out there. We're in the car, and we're going down the block, and we're ready for like a three-day Airbnb trip. And I stop at this big intersection. That I grew up at that intersection. I could do that in my sleep. And then I just start going, and then we get hit by a limousine. So I could ask my SD for the details. She remembers them, but we got hit by the limo, and I started driving, and the steering was a little off. I took it to a mechanic. He looked at it. He B'diavad gave me a heter. He's like, okay, you should be able to make it. Don't go over a certain speed. I don't remember what he said. I don't remember the time what he said. And I don't remember now what he said. But he basically was like, he said, okay, maybe you can get away with it. I don't think he realized they're going to be traveling on the highway for the next 3 days. So 3 days later, we're driving on our final stretch in Pennsylvania to Cleveland, and a bunch of little warning bells go off. And a friend of mine told me, I think he calls his dashboard like the holiday tree. All the little colors and all the lights start blinking. And I realized something's wrong with the steering. And I quickly pull over on the side of a very busy highway, and the tire's shredded to pieces, and there's a trail of tire going all the way back, literally shredded down to nothing. And the emergency people came, and they're like, wow, you're in a really bad spot. I was like, yeah, thank you. And it was basically what happened was that limo had thrown off, there was no damage that we saw at the time really, but the limo had thrown off the alignment just enough, we found out afterwards, that if the wheels aren't perfectly balanced, so it throws off like the angle of the tire, and then it puts too much pressure, not in an even way, and eventually the tire can't handle that pressure that's not balanced properly until the tire just shreds to pieces, and it's be very unpleasant, dangerous, and expensive situation. So the aside here was something very, very small had gotten thrown off somewhere very much at the beginning. I talked myself into, kind of talking the mechanic into talking me into making it okay to go. And we went, and although we tried being blissful about it, and maybe this wasn't the best move, but everything worked out until we realized that the entire time, that one little thing that was off in the alignment was causing something there to just get damaged. And while the wheels looked like they were moving fine, and I kept checking them over time, really there was something there that even though we were living our life totally normal afterwards, and we did everything we felt we should, we went, we traveled, we went around, every time that we was going around, it was getting worse and worse and worse, till it blew up in our faces. And as soon as it happened, we realized, oh, okay, fine. We were able to trace back exactly what we did wrong. Okay, it was the tire. It was off. It's because of the accident. We shouldn't have done it. And it needed no explanation. But that's what happened. Just basically the idea was something, we just kept on living life normally, while something was a little bit off kilter that we probably should have sensed, talked ourselves out of it, and that's what happened. Okay. Going back to Yehuda. Yehuda shows up to Yosef, and he goes through all the steps. Now, what's interesting is what happens. Yosef, at the end of the whole drasha, At the end of the whole, back and forth, you did this to us, you did that to us, and what about our father? After all that, Yosef just dropped one little thing, Ani Yosef. I'm Yosef. That's it. And like Rashi, Chazal say, we all know, that threw everything back into perspective. The way I see it was, he was saying, there was one component here that you missed. You're telling me the whole history of our interactions, and you're right according to all that. You did everything right. You drove the speed limit, you got the oil changes, you checked up on, you did everything right. But there was one component at the beginning that was off. And that one component, it threw everything, it just threw everything off. And then we kept on having these interactions. You're coming back to Mitzrayim, back to your father's getting worried, what about our brother? There was that one little component that was off. That was where everything went wrong. So yeah, you have this 20-step argument against me, and you're wondering and you're confused, but look, the tire got hit. The alignment was off. So you're right, everything you did say, steps 2 through 20 that we had, they all make a lot of sense. But go back to step 1. Step 1 was, you sold me. Step 1 was, I'm Yosef. And that's why, and as soon as you heard that, Rav Shach says, Ani Yosef. That's all he needed to hear, all they needed to hear. There was no explanation. At that point already, they couldn't speak to him anymore. They were like, on their level, the Shvatim were speechless. Why? Because they didn't need any explanation. As soon as you say, I'm Yosef, or Lahavdil, it was that tire a couple days ago. We really shouldn't have driven for 500 miles on it. It all fell back into place on its own. So what I took out of this is, there's sometimes a person, they live their lives, and they do their day-to-day things, and they convince themselves of something, and from step 2 to step 100, everything works out great. Their hashkafa is good, their philosophy about something is good, their way of living is good, their way of interacting with people is good, their way of viewing themselves right, and it all makes sense. But the problem is they miss step 1 all the way back at the beginning, and then you're just driving on a faulty tire. And the more you go, it doesn't make everything, everything makes sense, except it all doesn't, except it was all wrong. Everything in your wrong way of living was right. But you have to go back to that first step. I had another time also, I was visiting my parents also in Teaneck, and my brother lived in Passaic, still lives in Passaic, and I went to go visit him. I went to go drop him off or something. It was Erev Pesach, so it's like 15 minutes away. So I drop him off, and I didn't know how to get back from Passaic to my parents' house back then, so I take my GPS, I hit home, and I start driving. After like 20 minutes, a half hour, I realized I'm driving in like northwest New Jersey, like towards Pennsylvania. And I realized, home in my GPS is Cleveland. I was like, I'm going to my parents' house, home, right? So I was realizing if I would have just kept going, I would have ended up Pesach in the Bertram Inn, right? I just would have hi, And if I would have showed up and said, Rabbi Kushner, whatever, he would have right away. Also, he wouldn't need any explanation. No, whatever. Yeah, you could stay. But the point is, I picked it up, but there was one little thing wrong. My home was set to my old home, not my home not where I live now. It was that one little mistake. I could have driven. I followed the speed limits. I followed everything the GPS, everything Waze told me to do. Except I would have ended up in the completely wrong direction. So to me, that was this kind of the same idea. And I think that, I remember it was a couple years ago, there was a story in Iran that there was some unknown country sent a virus to these Iranian nuclear centrifuges where they got their nuclear centrifuge thingy to spin and spin and spin way too fast. And there's supposed to be something which regulates them. I really do know, I could explain it, but it's just short on time. And they spun and spun until they spun too fast, nothing cooled them down, and they melted down and exploded. Because what happened was they disabled this one little feature somewhere in there which tells it to stop spinning a certain speed, or it disables something which tells it where to know its limits. So it thinks it's spinning, like that tire spins and spins until it explodes. And only then you realize, wait, something's wrong. Because some little small nakuda there is a problem. And I find this all the time. I find this in these 3 areas. There's ben adam l'makom, right? Sometimes when people are growing in their mitzvahs, they think they're davening perfectly well. They might just not even know what sometimes it's like, oh wait, that word in that part of Shemona Esrei, I actually might have had it wrong. I might have actually been kind of I don't know if I've been getting that to feel it right for the last X amount of years. Or it could be, I remember I knew a guy once, he was really trying to shtag, but he would sit and learn Musar till 2 o'clock in the morning, but he would mishachris the next day. Same idea. He convinced, everything was in check. He's sitting in his learning, but you forgot that that regulating part of you. So you keep going and going, and then the Musar is almost maybe counterproductive. It's like the wrong focus. So it could happen when a person's doing his own mitzvahs. It could happen ben adam l'chaver, a person's relationships. A person could think he's popular. A person, he has friends, and it could be he does. But sometimes it's just things feel a little. He could be the biggest Baal Chesed in the world. He could run 20 organizations, but he doesn't give enough attention to his kids when they come home at night, and he doesn't smile at them enough, and they don't feel they're getting from him. Right? A person could feel like he's the nicest guy in the world, but maybe to his wife and kids also, he doesn't have time for them. He's impatient with them because he's too busy trying to get to whatever's going on in the rest of the world. Same idea. The guy thinks he is like the king, and he really is doing everything right, but he's missing one nakuda. But certain things come first. And what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from you, you have to keep that list in check. If you don't keep it in check, you're going and you're getting honored and you're saving the world, except for your wife, the people in the office you're working with, your kids. You have this with friends all the time. Like, we're the good kids, we're this type of kid, they're that type of kid. Or you feel like, I'm right in how I want to go about a certain trip a certain way. I'm so right. I'm going to plan this down to the T. I don't know what those other guys are thinking. And but you know in the back of your head, they're not so happy with you. But you override it with but I'm right. It just has to be that way. So you go and you live your whole life like that until you get a name for yourself, and no one's even going to tell you that you're really not the easiest person to deal with. And the last thing is also when a person's, let's say in learning, you can go through a whole sugya. We just had this. Last week we went through a whole sugya, difficult steps, Balpeh. We went through Gemara, and what really taught it with Sruli and Yoni, I think one of the takeaways is that if you have one little step that's off there, you start to realize that 5 steps later in the Gemara, something's not going, and then you kind of break down, right? So you learn the value of step after step after step. I'm sure we've all had this. You've had a friend say a chabura, say a shtickle Torah somewhere. Let's say later on you're in yeshiva, you're in kollel, or you're saying something, and you're putting it together. Your friend says something, and he missed, he just blew through one little stop sign. He got one little thing wrong, and he built up this whole deck of tower of cards. The tower where you make the cards and they fall apart, right? And it was just based on one little thing. So even in learning, he could do it, and he thinks he's right, and he'll get the schar. But that one little step you miss, you just keep going, and you drive on that tire and drive on it. Eventually, it's going to blow up. People are going to see it, and you're going to see it. You're going to feel it, and it's dangerous. So, I once I had a Rosh Chabur in the mirror who told me. He said that he heard of or he read somewhere, I don't remember what, there was a famous ski instructor, very famous, he was the one who taught the Olympians, a really famous, really big expert in skiing. And he said invariably when skiers would come to him, a person who's been skiing for 10 years and he's a Olympic medalist, but he feels like something's wrong or he's slipping somewhere. He said invariably they come and he says, okay, show me your technique. I'm going to sit and watch you do what you think is the right way, and he'll catch him on something basic. He won't catch him on he'll catch him on something basic, how he's positioning his leg, or how he's throwing his weight. He said it'll come down to something small, and as soon as they fix that, everything falls back into place. Because more often than not, it's not that you're having issues, when you're doing something, your person's an expert in an area, he knows it, but sometimes he's so good at it, he forgets that small area. I know that how to run my car, I know how to drive it, I know how to maintain it, I know how to name them, I know how to give them loving care till I get very weird looks, right? My family also till they got used to, but you know what? When your alignment's a little bit off, that's going to be more dangerous than if one day you didn't say a nice good morning to Henry. It's just, one last thing also, and I'm going to try to tie this in. There was a story of somebody in Cleveland Heights. So, these stories of somebody, he was feeling great and he had a regular checkup with the doctor, and then the doctor looks at him and he finds out that he's got all his valves blocked and he needs emergency surgery that day. And it happened to somebody in the community during COVID, right before Pesach. And his life, his mom is saved. Why? Because he went for a checkup. He went for a regular routine checkup. He never would have seen it otherwise. There weren't even any signs, but he had a regular checkup in place, and that's how he would have just kept on going and felt good and everything looked great, and he would have dropped dead the next day if he didn't catch it. Because same thing, he would have just kept going on that faulty tire. So we need a system in place. How do we keep ourselves in check? Sometimes the signals are not as clear. Sometimes they are clear, but a lot of times. It's one thing if you're a skier and you have signals that things are wrong. It's another thing if if your car has an engine light. Okay, it's got the clear engine light. You go to the mechanic. You go to your ski. What was the thing from Kung Fu Panda? Not the master. Shifu. You go to your ski shifu, right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Right. So you go to them, right? But when it's coming internally, it's not as easy. Your Yetzer Hara doesn't want that. When you're dealing with people, you're not a car. You're not a machine. My car might be a person, but I'm not a car. So what happens is you get those signals, but Yetzer Hara pulls back. Me? I am like Mr. Popular. There's no way I'm doing something wrong. It's their problem. If they think that I'm being a whatever, last night in the dorm, guys were looking at me and telling me to chill out, stop being like that. It was them, it wasn't me. So a person has to learn, first of all, that when they're dealing with their own personal growth and there are those signals, you're already at a disadvantage. And sometimes the biggest signal is not that something is wrong, it's that you're fighting back too hard. Like when you sense yourself saying, no, everyone else is crazy, that itself could be the biggest signal. But there's a few strategies I thought maybe we could put together. One of them is internally. if a person is in the mode of growing, a person is trying, he really latches on, like Rabbi says, the person really decides he's ready to succeed and he's ready to really like pull himself up above and he's really ready to he realizes he has potential and he wants to work towards it. So once the person gets into that groove of learning success and learning how to grow and learning how to hit those milestones and he gets used to it. So the same way, it's the same level, the same way a Gadol B'Yisrael, will be able to make a decision as Das Torah. How? Because they've been growing and learning and they're so involved in Torah and so involved in steiging and all these things. So then it automatically gives the person thinks like the Torah, so a person will start already getting it. It'll be built into his seichel. And then you don't have to be the Chazon Ish to be like that. Everyone according to their level. As soon as you get on that track and you start moving, you'll start picking up from personal experience, from things around you. You're set. You'll pick up things that'll feel a little bit off. Should we be going there? Should we be doing that? Should I be acting this way? Should I be using that word? Should I be talking about this thing? Maybe I'm above it. That's just that's one of the perks of when a person makes a conscious decision to take that road to slowly but surely try to work on himself. So that's the intro. There's external cues from people around you, we said. Person sees he's getting a lot of criticism if it's from his friends. So I keep on saying this. Person's best friend is somebody who can call out his friend on doing something wrong. That is what one of the main things a friend is for. That I can go over and say, listen, I don't have to talk that way, come on. It could be a very small little nuance. It could be at the breakfast table. A guy said something all right, you're right, I'm sorry. There's nothing better for a friend or anybody who cares about you than to call you out on something that's bad. It's like that with physical danger, and it's like that with ruchlistic danger. And there's no bigger gvura, bigger strength for somebody to hear and accept some kind of mussar like that and to internalize it and not just blow the guy off. Right? Rebbeim also. For Rebbeim, sometimes you hear something repeatedly from Rebbeim to work on something. If you hear the alarm button repeatedly, it doesn't mean, oh, there it goes again. It means get it fixed, right? If you're flying a plane and it says pull up, pull up, pull up, oh, there it goes again. No, it means you're getting closer and closer to crashing, right? So that's also, you either approach your Rebbeim when you're trying to grow, or you hear what they're telling you when they're pointing things out to you because they've been there also. And then sometimes also, you have a realistic, I always thought that having a best friend is somebody who I just who likes me, doesn't criticize me, or having a good chaver is fun to be around. But if you notice that it's not always so much fun, or people keep on calling you out, and you keep on having to go into that mode of no, I'm really good, they're all crazy. That's another cue. Realize that there's something up. Realize you got to start, find that, and it could be something very, very small. That's usually what it is. Yetzer Hara is not going to want you to fix it, but a lot of times when you find that problem, hey, you know what? Sometimes I'm a little bit too pushy with my friends. Maybe I should just learn sometimes that if I have a suggestion, they have a suggestion, just hear them out a little bit. I could disagree with somebody, just stop and hear them. I can still disagree, but hear them. If I'm learning a Gemara, it's sometimes the most difficult thing to have to stop and repeat that step, get it clear. That's to me one of the biggest Yetzer Haras in learning. It's just okay, I know it. I know it. Look at it again. Be clear. And then when you do it, you'll see something so small. I could have looked and found, my alignment is just a little off. That would have solved everything. So sometimes the expectation is hard and the problem seems so hard, but the beauty of it is that sometimes many times you look at a problem you're having in your growth with your friends, with your learning, it usually comes out as something very, very basic, and there's a lot of people around you and a lot of tools, people who want to help you. Right? There's some people the other way. I saw a few times dealing with phones. I remember sometimes a guy once walked in to a friend of mine and said, my phone's broken. I don't know, it's not working. I called the company. It's just, they said, it's got to be this and it's got to be that. I tried switching the SIM card, and the whole thing. And the guy says, can I see your phone for a second? He opens up the back, and the SIM card was upside down. Right? He spoke to the company for an hour. He did a whole runaround, but the problem was nothing. He reached out and got help, and he found out it was a small little problem. Another time I saw somebody walk in with a phone they said, well, I don't know, the phone's trippy and it's flickering and it's not really working and it recently got wet, but maybe there's something wrong with the phone, the filter or something. Maybe it got wet? You mean you dropped it into the sink? You know the answer already, but there's some people they'll know the answer, they'll identify the problem, they can't get away from them, the phone's already broken, so what do? Maybe it's something else, it's not me, I don't need to buy a new one, it must be under the warranty or something. So sometimes our problems, when we really seriously want to approach them, are very small, and sometimes even if they're small, we're so averse to helping ourselves. We make it so difficult that we decide already, I'll get help, but it's got to be something else. Doctor, my throat hurts, but it's not strep. I don't want to take medicine. Right? So that's really what it comes down to. So just through all those examples, when I was driving with the GPS, I realized right away, no, this is not towards my parents' house. This is towards the other. This is going the wrong direction. When it says I-80 West, the West means the wrong way. When it came to the ski instructor, it's a matter of reaching out for help. I see things aren't going. I'm a gold medalist, but I'm going to reach out for help. I'll go to somebody else. I can't do it myself. I can't just, it's not a GPS thing, but I'll get help. Sometimes, like you said, it just comes down to regular checkups. A person has to have a way, like a person who has no other way of getting caught, not about to get a heart attack, got saved from a heart attack just because he has routine checkups in place. It's a big thing. If a person can check, with friends or sit, this is what Elul and Yonah Rhyme are for. A person takes that yearly check. Person once a month looks at himself. As you progress, you make Kabbalahs, you open up a notebook. Have that routine maintenance in check. Because even just, it's all the same thing as like a car. A car is getting an oil change even if you take care of it, because that's just the way it's built. We just need to be recalibrated sometimes. So looking back, again, like you have the parsha of Eliezer and Rivka. So I'm even to say, Eliezer, you're going to find a girl, and she's going to do this, and with the wells, and with the camels, and a whole story. And Eliezer it happens with Rivka, he finds Rivka, gets to her father, and explains the whole, to Basul, to love, and explains the whole thing from the beginning, the whole story. And Avraham Avinu told me this, and he told me to look for Rivka, and Rivka said this, and she followed all the protocol. He went through all the steps that you see from there. Everything was clear, because from step one, he checked off all the boxes. He was watching from step one and got it all right. From Yehuda, and again, this is all leaving stuff to Chazal, but from the Psukim, it looks like it was the same idea. You see, you have the same parsha where he sits and he goes, delineates everything from step one. He was making the cheshbon. Yehuda was also making the cheshbon. But there was one thing that he missed, and all the Shvatim missed, is that it all started with selling Yosef. And if you miss that one step, and again, it's not for me to tell them where that step, how they get their eitzes, and that's all could their level. But my takeaway is that if we are always checking ourselves, or if we regularly, every 10,000 miles you check yourself. And if there are little things, like little warning bells that come up, either from within you, or from outside of you, from people around you, and these cues pick up, or things just don't feel right, I'm growing and it feels like it's pulling me down, either try it yourself, do your own repairs, reach out to somebody, everyone wants to help you. Basically, just, be careful along the way, be honest with yourself, keep yourself very clear. You have all these tools, and just enjoy every step of the way and keep stagging up your Shabbos.